Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live Say It Out Loud, Innovating Out Loud episode with Regenerous Labs. As you can tell, Taryn is not here because she would usually do this intro. She is live in real life in Toronto at Innovators. So if you're in the Toronto area, get over there, catch her and Leo Chan, our last guest, or the guest before the last guest. And but today I am super pleased to welcome Larry Robertson. He is an innovation advisor, a strategic consultant of he's founded Lighthouse decades ago, which is amazing among itself, but he's also a four-time author and award-winning author. And most importantly, he's one of my favorite collaborative partners and somebody that at least once a month I get on the phone and we say it ugly for hours about various topics. But today, Larry and I are going to question questions. And it's part in response to his new book, which you can see behind him is Great Question: The Art of the Ask and Getting More of What You Really Want. But also, as we were preparing for this session, we realized we take it for granted that questions are the foundation of innovation and great questions lead to better innovation. And we said, well, let's challenge our own assumptions. So, with that, I will give it to Larry to give a little more color about his background and his initial thoughts on questioning questions.
Thank you, Joanne. It is so fun to be here and to feel like we have an added group to our monthly sessions. There's a part of me that always wants to do it more than one time a month, but we get so much in our brains out of that one time. I almost need the month to sort it out.
True.
Um, I'll give you 2 points of background that I think could launch us into an interesting conversation today. So the first one is that this newest book is really a build out of the others that are behind me too. And the focus of each of the first three in order was entrepreneurship, creativity, and leadership, but specifically leadership in uncertainty. And so as an advisor, as a practitioner, as a researcher, and as a writer, I kept seeing in each of those topics how critical great questioning was to the successful entrepreneur who makes a lasting impact, not just the one that turns the corner, but has a lasting impact, or to the creative that actually creates tangible value that others can enjoy, or the leader who's dealing with the uncertainty that leads me to call this time we're living in the new abnormal because it's a constant and it's a constant changing form of uncertainty. This book took a step further to say, okay, but is there something larger about questions that contributes to all of those topics and others? Can I get out of questions and not be bound to specific applications? That's really what the origin was for this book. It was a book I tried to talk myself out of. And one was
I
the
remember.
exhaustion of the last book. But the other thing was, I just assumed there were already a lot of books about questions out there, research papers, and so on. There are a lot of things out there with the word question on them, but there really is very little out there that looks at questions in the larger sense. And that really leads me to the other thing that I think is an interesting beginning here. You wrote in promoting this conversation that we're having that great questions are at the foundation of all innovation. I agree. I would add two words and say great questions are the foundation of all effective and impactful innovation.
Yeah.
Because innovation can happen in other ways. It just doesn't tend to be very lasting or very innovative, is the way I would think of it. But I think there's a substrate that we forget about, and that is we are a questioning species in the sense that we not only use questions for our survival, even before we acquire language, but we use it to look forward into the future, into a future that doesn't exist, a future we might make out of things that don't even exist right now. And we're able to do that because we're built for questions. Our brains are built for questions. And when I talk to more than 13 neuroscientists. There are some who just kind of dabble on the edges. There are 13 who do it officially. They came to similar conclusions. And the one is that I think is really important here is that your brain is at its best when it's solving, but better still when it's doing that in unstable conditions, change, complexity, uncertainty. It can be outward change, complexity, and uncertainty, or what we generate when we try to innovate something new. We cause it and create this complexity. Our brains are at their best when they're in near constant motion, when they're unrestricted, when they're in discovery mode, seeking to create, thinking, not simply retrieving files.
Yeah.
And one of the people that I interviewed and spoke with at length was Sandy Chapman, who is a neuroscientist. She's also the founder of the Brain Health Center in Dallas, Texas. And she calls this interaction in our brain when we put a question there going into innovation mode. And it
Oh,
is simply allowing your brain to think in those conditions when it's at its best. So not only are questions at the root of all effective and impactful innovation, they're at the root of who we are and our way to tap the best within us.
oh, that's wild. But I find myself with a question.
Ah,
What do we
perfect.
mean by best?
Mm,
How does that manifest like physically for me? Because you know me, I live up there.
sure.
But what does it mean to be the best environment for us?
Ah, well, see, we're doing this wonderful shift again, right? Because first we can talk about best, but then you added to that environment.
Yeah.
And I think that really the environment almost answers the question of best better than saying what's best. Best is a moving target. Best
Yeah.
is an evolution. Best is an accumulation. Best is sometimes an editing out of what we think we know and thought we thought was the best for something new. And importantly, best is a collective process.
Yeah.
Because in order to bring out an individual best, ultimately you need that interaction with others who are bringing what they have. So that takes you into that environmental space where seeking best is an exchange, questioning is an exchange. And as you put it, when we talked for my new book, there are always at least two perspectives in any exchange.
Mhm.
So when you're individual and you're seeking your best, or when you're on your own and you're asking your own questions and not engaging with others, it's not that that's bad or doesn't have value.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately one perspective. As soon as you engage with others, as soon as your environment is one where everyone is allowed to question, I think then that's where you're moving further and further down the road to what your fullest potential is. And that's where I would put best in
Fullest
quotes.
fullest potential. Yeah. Because immediately I was like, questioning is great when I'm up and active and doing and trying to figure something out. It
Yeah.
really is awful when I'm trying to fall asleep.
Yes.
And I want my brain to just stop.
If you figure that out, will you let me know?
Yeah, I know. But you brought up something. It's interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but data centers are a big topic of
Hmm.
conversation
Yeah, I've heard that
today.
recently.
Yeah, yeah. And my old job at Microsoft was the data center of the future.
Yep.
And I've written a bunch of pieces. And two things I kind of want to tap into what you just said. Um, Everybody being allowed to question. I shared a piece not too long ago about intentional discovery, which is what I call the start of innovation, where
Hmm.
you purposefully step back and ask questions from every angle you can possibly get access to,
Yes.
right? When I did that for the data center of the future, I was met with pitchforks and flaming torches and, and just, not from everyone, just a select few who the idea that someone new to the company, lower in rank and outside of the data center industry would dare question
Yeah.
what we're doing. And I had to keep reminding them, I'm like, you literally hired me to imagine the data center of the future. The only way I could do that is to get smart and ask a lot of questions.
Sure.
But the interesting thing to put a bookend on it is all of those questions led myself and my team to when we converged and synthesized into the data center of the future, we came up with something that didn't look like a data center, didn't sound like a data center, wasn't manufactured like one, had a completely different environment created around it and value proposition between the data center and the community and nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now today I get these emails, unsolicited emails from people from back then that are like, I didn't really appreciate what you all were doing back then, but now it seems so prescient.
Sure.
And so for me, I'm like, that's not brilliance or magic. It was a bunch of us with different disciplines asking a lot of questions of each other and a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So for me, I get it. And I want to like, great questions are the foundation of innovation. But why do we get that not everybody has permission? And how do we start shifting that so that more people can show up on Monday and ask questions?
Yeah, so gosh, many thoughts are burning in my head from what you just said. Let me give you two that I think go to that. So one is I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do. This is a practice that I learned from a woman by the name of Deb Meyer. And Deb Meyer is an education consultant, but also an education revolutionary. What does that mean? It means that when schools are broken, she is one of the most renowned people for coming in and saying, okay, let's figure out how to fix it. When a
Oh,
new
cool.
idea for developing a school, on a model that hasn't existed before comes along, that's Deb's zone too. Deb has a practice that she uses individually, right? So we can't always get a group to go with us right away, but she uses it individually. She also asks that her teams, that her communities, her cultures within the schools she works use it as well on a daily basis, including the new hires, including the people, way down the line that we don't think get to make the decisions and so on. And not surprisingly, it's about asking five questions. She calls it the five habits of the mind. And the first is, how do we know what we know? So it's just looking at your assumptions. It's not asking you to change anything. How do we know that? Do the things that we knew that built up to those assumptions still apply?
Yeah.
Have some of them gone cold? Are they somewhere in the middle where maybe there's a twist? The assumption is still there, but it has a different meaning now. Are there new things? The second question is there a pattern? So I'm seeing these anomalies that might cause me to question what I know or don't know. But until it starts to add up to something, up to a pattern, to put it in her simpler term, it's just something worth watching, worth rather than something worth ruminating on and creating around, which leads to the third question. What if? Now that we've talked about how we know what we know, now that we've looked at the patterns we're seeing, which can be threatening or they can be opportunistic or whatever they might be, what if and you're moving towards creation, solution, but only in the idea form, which brings you to
Yeah.
this fourth habit of the mind, which is there another way?
Yeah.
Because there's always another way. And the idea is to keep that questioning and that creation open, even as you move towards an end. And the fifth habit brings me right back to one of the things I know you emphasize. The fifth question is, who cares? Because if
Yeah.
you don't know who cares, then it's really hard not only to define the value you're creating, but to have it land. So all of this
Yeah.
is just an exercise in saying what's around us, what's in this space, and can we get more than one perspective? Remember, I said she doesn't just do it individually, she does it in groups and teams and whole organizations. It's just to tap into that. And it reminds me of the second thing that was resonating in my head. One of your partners in the labs, Terry Sun, said this to me. A question is just going there. That's it.
Yeah.
It is not about having to make a change or a decision. Might it ultimately lead to that? Sure, but that change will be an accumulation of many questions and many ideas. But with any individual question, you're just going there to confirm, to see new things, to see new possibilities.
Very cool. I like the stack of that five habits of mind
Yep.
because it's real easy to forget that there's more questions. Like, we're a very introspective species. And so we end up asking why a lot. And Simon Sinek didn't help us. Everybody caught on. It's a very catchy phrase. And it's great for marketing if that's the space you're in, start with
Yeah,
why. But
yeah,
for most other applications, starting with why is a rabbit hole you'll never get out of.
for sure.
So, starting with what do I think I know and how do I know it? And two of the most powerful questions in innovation are what if and how might, right?
Mm, hmm.
And the reason they're so powerful is because they have no consequence. We're not saying let's do this thing. We're saying what if we did this thing?
That's right.
What happens? If that's true, then what?
Yep.
Right. And it snowballs. And when you take that, we talked about, I just did a workshop with a group of 30 middle senior managers at a big tech company. And we were exploring their strategic objectives and trying to get to the why does this matter? Who cares
Sure.
part. And the only question I told them they couldn't ask was why. I was like, because that'll stop the questioning as soon as you start with why. Um, so that's really, I love the stacking of it. And
And on that last point, Joanne, Angus Fletcher echoes that in Primal Intelligence, saying all the other questions, all the typical questions we know, the who, what, when, where, and so on, are really important. They're also the kind of questions that don't really have an end or a conclusion to them, right? So we
yeah,
often think of why as something that it's tough to settle on something and know exactly why, but that's exactly what we try to do. And
right.
so if we allow ourselves to ask why too soon or too often, we shut down all those other questions. We don't do it knowingly, but we
Yeah.
shut it down. If we're focused instead on, not only the other questions, but who they apply to,
Oh,
excuse me,
yes.
including who they apply to among the innovators, among the innovation team, among the organization that they're doing that innovating with, all of a sudden this magic starts to come forth. Things like decentering, which
Yeah.
your co-author Dean talks about a lot, this conscious breaking down of existing connections to make sure they're clear or right or still, where they should be to take advantage of the opportunity. The questions are litmus tests over and over again about not just the whole idea, but sometimes just components of the idea. And it's the very space in which you make the new connections and have the accumulation of smaller ideas that lead into bigger ones. So, it's interesting because you could stop at that fear of letting people ask, of inviting them to ask, and you would never make your way down, not only to the other questions that you ask or that Deb Meyer asks or so on, but to the gold, to the riches that come with decentering, these litmus tests, these new connections, and so on.
And built in there underneath all of this is the premise that innovation is value creation,
Mm,
right? We talk a lot in our book that there's a distinct difference between ideation, invention, and innovation. And we'll go
yes.
back to it 1,000 times. Dean and I both love the quote from Julia Lucen that's if it's not out changing someone's life, a customer's life, it's not innovation. It's
Mm,
just a cool idea,
yeah,
right? And you can have 100 patents on the wall, but if they're not out doing things in the world, are they really worth anything?
for
Right.
sure.
So,
And that quote, I gotta jump in on that quote. Changing their lives expands the possibilities of what the definition of value is.
yes.
So, and the greatest value that comes from any innovation tends to be a combination of different forms of value. So it's easy to go very quickly to what's the financial reward of this. I'm thinking
Right.
when you put your data center idea forward for the first time and it was so dramatically different, means that it was also different from the pricing model, from the business model behind it, from the how much are we going to make model. And, that can be a little unnerving, but the real value starts with something greater. And then, of course, it includes those other forms. So
Yeah.
I love the changing life because it says, okay, are we really changing life or we're just making a new buck? Because if we're
Right.
making a new buck is not a problem unless it's not lasting. and unless
right?
it doesn't create that reinforcing value.
Or if it doesn't create value for someone that's critical for the success of your new way of making the buck,
For
right?
sure.
And that's what we're seeing in the data center world that everybody's emailing me about. They're just like, oh God, when you started this back in 2020, we were like, the communities, they don't really matter. Like we give them tax, we give them revenue, tax revenue, we give them, tech training and free Wi-Fi. They're happy. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
really not. Like, if you go out and ask people, are they happy about these things? They're not happy. And
right.
they're not feeling what you're bringing. Like, what they feel is a building the size of an aircraft carrier
Mm,
where their forest used to be that hums all day and night and has lights that drive away the birds and has concrete instead of grass. And I'm like, that's what they experience. And I'm like, but it doesn't have to be that way. And
yeah.
to your point, where we landed really was before we designed anything, we asked a different question.
Mm,
We so everything in the data center world is how do we get permitted to build a data center? By the time we were done our exploration, we flipped it and we said, what if people were asking us to build a data center?
wow. Yeah. Totally different
Cannot
perspective.
cannot solve it the same way with that being the guiding question.
For sure. And you're just going there,
Yeah, we're just going
right?
there.
Nobody said you're going to do it that way, but what might you find if you go there? And there's always this other side of the coin when it comes to questions that we know is there and we kind of nod, but we undervalue it, and that's listening.
Yes.
And listening to really absorb listening in the context of innovation. Let's just keep using that example to derive something that you wouldn't have otherwise derived, or
Yeah.
to take it to a place that didn't exist before requires a different sort of listening. In the book, I talk about intellectual humility.
Mm.
And the simple definition of intellectual humility, people only take the first part, that they have to listen well because what they know might, might be short of all the knowledge that's out there. Actually, the real
Yeah.
definition of intellectual humility suggests that you also need to be prepared that you might be wrong
Yep.
and that because you don't know it all and you might be wrong, at least in a certain context, you might have to change. But again, all those layers are simply about a going there to see what you might get if you flip the script as you talked about it. A couple of the phrases that came up when I was interviewing people that I think that gives you a tangible to say, okay, that's great, but how do I start engaging intellectual humility, especially when I don't want to appear
Yeah.
as though I don't know everything. And Caitlin Chusey at Microsoft said to me that her phrase she always reminds herself of is to try to quiet her cleverness.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
from
it's
Janine Benyus from the
exactly,
biomimicry world. I
exactly.
love that perspective.
It's beautiful and it says don't get rid of your cleverness.
Hmm.
It doesn't say yield your cleverness. It says just quiet it so that you can hear in a different way. Jim Lampley, who's a communications professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, he talks about listening atmospherically. So all those things we were talking about before, how do we know what we know, the patterns that we're seeing, what are the possibilities, what are other ideas? If you listen in with that kind of scope, suddenly you need to know what other people are saying, what they want, what
Yeah.
is innovative in their minds. And you get to this third phrase that I love, which is decolonizing our thinking. Abe
Mm.
Abusharaf, who's a professor at Northwestern, uses that. And he says it's just so easy to hone in very, very quickly and not
Ah,
realize that we've built this little walled colony around how we think, where we go for information, and even where we go for ideas and how we innovate. So if we can decolonize out of our thinking, we might
yep.
see something different.
Dean and I, in our book, just call that one of the things that kills truly valuable innovation, transformational, not like continuous improvement level, which
Yep.
is so important, But when you're really trying to prepare for the future or disrupt a market or something, we have a habit of converging too soon. It's very
Yes.
uncomfortable. Like I get even from some of my longest innovation partners, I almost thrive out in the ocean with no land in sight. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
woohoo. Everybody else sees sharks circling and they're like, oh my God, I got to get somewhere. And I don't know, did that come up in the neuroscience? Like, why do we do that early convergence? And how do we? I have a couple of techniques to help people stay out of that, but I'm curious what the brain scientists might say about how to keep people comfortable swimming in the middle of the ocean longer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about the people who not only want to see the shore, they want to be on the shore. They feel better there. That is equally a part of what our human brains are trying to do. Look, I always think about it as you should always question, but you can't only question.
Mm,
And so if you have that in mind, answers are important. We can argue for more than 45 minutes about, which is more important in an answer or a question, and I certainly have a bias to that. But really, both things have to exist. So your brain wants to solve for efficiency reasons, your brain wants to solve for comfort reasons, but your brain is not only satisfied with that. Your
yeah.
brain wants to grow, and growing is connecting new synapses and making, it needs to be in ambiguous territory in order to do that best. So this learning to live with, we're built for both of those things. And the balance is going to be different for different people. It's going to be different for the same person in different circumstances. It's going to be different for the same person in different teams, but
Yeah.
it's both things. It's the only way that you can not only thrive in the moment, but adapt to the next one.
And you had a lot of educators in the book,
Lots, all levels,
all levels.
kindergarten through, presidents and provosts, and so everyone in between.
And one of my favorite exercises is the question storm, which came out of education
Yeah.
innovation. And it what you just said, it's full circle back to the what is best. And Dean and I danced around the fact at the end of the book, we landed on an idea that probably is the start of the next book, which is everybody we met exuded this serious joy.
Mm,
Their work was serious and difficult, and they were under pressure. They're in this Microsoft environment of 14-hour days and blah, blah, blah. But they were genuinely joyful about the challenge and the work and what they
yes.
produce and how they've contributed to the world. And we felt like that was the greatest takeaway. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that's the the physical manifestation of best is too often we only go for the sure, for the answer, for the comfort, or we're pushed there.
Yes.
But
Yes.
these people, dozens and dozens of people throughout Microsoft history demonstrate there's the joy comes from going back and forth between these modes and learning how to do it repeatedly without burning out or getting exhausted or going broke. I always joke in the entrepreneurial world, to your point, you can't only question because then you don't pay your mortgage.
That's right. Well, and think about this. So there's a really interesting role. I mean, we're talking about something that individuals need to think about, teams need to think about, but cultures need to think about this too.
Yeah.
So a culture can enable that going back between the joy and the trepidations that often precede joy or lead to the next joy or whatever. A culture can help to support that dynamic or to make it feel like, you just want to get to the joy moment and then stay there because you don't want to be a target either. But
Mm,
it's fascinating because I saw across the teams that you all interviewed for your book and the stories that you told that even in an organization that had a very defensive reaction to your data center ideas that were so
Yeah.
new, there was an allowance, at least within pockets of Microsoft, for these other things that you and Dean write about, and that I
Yeah.
talked to Dean Hachimovich about, who was the creator of autocorrect at Microsoft way
Yeah.
back when. And he said it was all about the team that he was in. It was all
Yeah.
about the allowance that his manager gave him, and it was about his decision to take the invitation and do something with it. The same manager managed over other teams that decided not to do that because they were fearful. So there's a real human element that says we're both things. There's a
Yeah.
real human element that says culturally we're both things.
Yeah.
So what are we going to allow even as we have specific goals and targets that we're trying to meet? And what are we going to allow that allows us to continue to meet those over time? I mean, think
And-
about what you always talk about. Out loud is the name of this podcast. Loopy.
Yeah.
Loopy means good and bad, and I feel joy, and now I feel trepidation about this. Ugly.
Yeah.
These things you repeat over and over are key to effective and impactful innovation. You can't have any of those if you're trying to stay in that one mode of, oh, I reached this peak and I feel joy. I don't want to go anywhere else.
And underneath all of this, again, I'm going to see what you learned in all of, you did like 140
Yeah.
different people. So
Yep.
I can only, I mean, we can't even begin to scratch the surface of what you've learned. So I'm just going to like work with you on things because then you'll
Love
bring
it.
it.
Yeah.
Um, but underneath all of that, the ability to say it ugly, the ability to think out loud, to innovate out loud, all of those things, our our collaborative partner Dan Greenwald and Terry Sun will say it starts with trust,
Mm,
high trust, right? So for the people in my team at Microsoft that I was the lead, so I was given air cover,
yeah.
they had absolute open terrain to go and question and explore, and all the arrows were shot at me,
Hmm.
right? Because I established that trust with them. But what we didn't have was trust from certain individuals above,
Yeah.
despite our best efforts. And I wonder how trust came up in the questioning process and disciplines that you learned. And what did you learn about it?
This is going to sound like maybe not the thrilling conclusion, but I think the most important one. Trust was addressed very directly. And what it always came back to was the starting point of trust in yourself.
Mm,
And when it came to questions, trust in your own practice of questioning. This does not mean you know everything. It does
right.
not mean you'll always do it the right way. But this faith that I need to do this faith
Right.
that I have practiced this faith that I've made it out of both good outcomes and bad outcomes of my playing around with questions is something that I have to trust. And if I don't trust in myself, there's no way that I can ever build that with a team, whether I'm the leader or I'm a contributor or something in between. If it's not there in you to start, it you can't build on it. It's like
Yeah.
building on sand versus building on stone. So I found the fact that and these are people across sectors. We talked about neuroscience, but it's across many sciences: anthropology, early childhood development, creativity, business, and so on and so forth. It's
Pure
people
art.
in yeah, art. Oh, absolutely, and in enormously varied ways, from actual artists like Stephen DeFalla, all the
Mhm.
way to people who are using art to train medical students how to diagnose and care for patients,
Oh, cool.
or people who are
Oh,
using
yeah, I
art.
remember that story.
Yeah, or they use art to reach a portion of the community that not only doesn't visit a museum but doesn't think they're allowed to
Right.
bring them into that. So yeah, and then we talked about education. There's business large and small and so on. So all of them are seeing these things that we're talking about and coming back to that centering point, including trust. And
Yeah.
all of them are saying, if I don't trust myself, then I can't even begin to do something. So Jeff Swartz, who was the CEO of Timberland, and that was started by his grandfather, built to a certain extent by his father, but he really turned it into the powerhouse that he ended up selling it for billions of dollars. He said outright, I was a person for much of my career who was all about getting to the right answer, like a period
Mm,
after every one of those words. But he also realized that he didn't have enough trust in himself to allow others into that process fully so that they could help him get to good answers, not the right answer, but good answers. And it wasn't until he flipped to trusting in asking questions, really raw questions, and letting others do it, that the company actually became, no pun intended, fleet of foot in terms of their growth
great pun.
and yeah, and their credibility in the marketplace.
It's interesting as we come around to the Q&A period. We've got maybe, let's give ourselves 8 more minutes, which
Heck.
we are really controlling ourselves. I'm proud. Um, we've stayed on topic,
So
but
far, still
so
have
far,
8 minutes to blow it in.
but what I'm feeling from all of these things you're pulling together is that, you know, trust, creativity, de-risking the future, um, enabling vibrant collaboration, all the things we talk about in innovation,
Yep.
intellectual humility, all of it is coming out in this conversation where we question whether questions are really the foundation of innovation.
Right.
And so I feel like we kind of are we be but let's question our question. Are we directing this conversation to make our point? Or do you really feel like, no, it's just like no matter what angle we come at, it always kind of comes back down to, are you questioning your assumptions? Are you getting to know other people's point of view, etc.?
Yes. It's so I my research and my experience directly in working with people around this uh, validates that repeatedly. And I keep poking around to try to find the holes in it. I mean, it happens in different ways, but questions are always there at the center. I will tell you the thing that pushed me to further confidence to say that this is so critical, not just to innovation, but to everything we do, were all the conversations I had with researchers in early childhood development. And they have very different focuses within that, but they come to this similar conclusions, I guess you could say they're interrelated, that not only would we be dead without our questioning ability, but it has evolved over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. So it's deeply embedded in us. And this is the thing that really stood out to me. We're born asking. So even before we acquire language, we're trying to figure out how do we cover our bases? How do we get food? How do we find a safe place to rest? People who care about us, even a place to play. And we're doing that without even expressing the words because that's how we're built to think and to act and then to engage in the world, including how we innovate. So it's core to who we are already. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't it be part of what we're talking about now? It's not like you can make it go away. You can cover it up due to a lack of practice, but it never leaves you.
Yeah. No, and as you're sharing all these lessons from this 140 person diverse perspective, I'm hearing Annie Duke in my mind saying thinking in bets. And I'm hearing Michael Gervais in my mind talking about athletes and performance and how they move through the world. And I'm hearing Steven in my mind, who, is my closest true live in the art life dude, where everything's questioned all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like, and he has to trust that he's going down a path that's or living life that's worth living and
And
producing
then he leaves
things.
his works open
Yeah.
so that you can ask.
Yes.
He moves away from anybody who says, "Well, what does this mean? What are you trying to signify here?" He doesn't answer that. I
Right.
mean, I tried, but he doesn't answer that. And I love more the reason why, because he wants it to be your stimulus for doing your own asking, even if you see or come up with something completely different from him. I mean, it's a wonderful seed that he plants.
Yeah. And it's what they tell you too when you write a book, right? You're going to do your best. You're going to try to share ideas and learnings and questions. But once the book's out in the world, people are going to take from it what they take from it, and
For
they're going to
sure.
read it through their own eyes. And as we got 4 minutes, and then Ethan's going to send us some questions from our audience. You brought up tangentially brought up biomimicry earlier. And one
Yes.
of the things I learned from the biomimics was you cannot change behavior, you can only change context.
Mm,
And so if you change the context people live in or work in or play in, you can create an environment or a context that builds the ability and the confidence to question.
yes.
And I'm just wondering, back to the practical nature of this show, what can people do no matter where they're at, in what context they're in already, to change the context such that they build their questioning habit and the people around them do as well?
So I'll give you the quick answers to that. The first one is start it individually. You don't have to change the whole group or the whole world overnight, and you're better when you trust yourself with your ability to play around with questions. The second thing is the book, not to promote the book, but the book is loaded what I call dips in the toolkit.
Yeah.
So there's a whole toolkit online in addition to the book that are ways to start to play around with how to ask and to dip into different elements of the art of the ask. And there are five of those. So I push that there. I always hesitate to say, oh, here's a question you should ask.
Yeah.
But I love this particular question because I always get a different result from it every time I ask myself. And that is the question of what do you already know that you will realize soon? Because I
Ooh.
think sometimes what keeps us from engaging in a new habit like questioning, what keeps us from bringing that to a team that we're working with that's supposed to deliver results, is that we haven't quieted our own cleverness. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have a deep of enough understanding of what we already know, including knowing what we don't know. So
Mm.
that question to me is almost like that, God, I'm looking everywhere for the answer, and here it is.
It
I
might
already
be in
know it,
me.
but I haven't gotten to the realize soon.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to sit with that one. I think that's part of it too. I want to double down on your trust yourself.
Mm,
When I'm forming a team and teaching them some of these habits or trying to establish these norms for us, I get a lot of eye rolls, but I always say trust the
yeah,
process works. Like if you
yeah,
work the process works. And I have, the data center of the future from 3 years ago is once again evidencing if you trust the process works, right?
yeah.
We asked more questions than we gave answers, and we swam, but it took time for everyone to feel like they weren't going to drown,
Hmm,
right?
hmm.
And I had to keep reassuring people like, nope, I got you. If I see you treading water, I'll help you. So I do. I've never thought of it that way, but it is an internal trust of we'll figure it out. Like
Yes, yes.
we will get to shore, but it'll be the one we actually probably want to be on. And if it's not, we'll swim back out and go to the next one,
Yeah.
you know?
It's interesting too, because I think, and I know we're moving towards the question time, when we have these discussions around asking and whether or not to do it, I'm going to put it as starkly as that. It's this vacillation between fear
Yes.
and what we want in terms of a promised outcome.
Yeah.
Those are not the things that we should trust because we don't know what those are going to look like. But there are some basic features within each of us that we can trust. There are three of them: curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
play,
Mm-hmm.
and search. We are
Hmm.
always a species in search. We are a species that doesn't always want to move forward, but always wants to wonder about what is forward of us. And so individually playing with those things I have seen elicits the kind of questions that you say, God, I don't even know what to ask. And instead, if you just allow yourself to be curious, think about what a question burst is. It's about getting as many questions out there as you can, not answering them.
Right.
That's simply about moving into your curiosity. It's a playful exercise because you don't have to have a specific outcome. It's not come up with five or 25. It's just come up with questions, right?
Yeah.
But you're moving yourself in a different direction to begin a search for eventually coming around to the answers you hope for that you don't even know yet. So those are things that I think you can control individually, and it leads to building more trust in yourself and then among others.
You just triggered a memory from my workshop where one of the strategies was brand development. And we were doing the question storm or question burst. And we did one round, get them warmed up, get all the get all the obvious questions out, right? And then for the second round, I was like, all right, now we're going to get weird. The goal is just the weirder the better. Like we're going to celebrate the weirdest question. And by the end of it, the weirdest question out of this one team that was talking brand was, what does our company smell like? And
Wow.
everybody was like, ah.
Wow. That is
And
on the
I was
weird
like,
side.
see that feeling that you have right there? That, ah.
Yeah.
That, like, I'm not saying that's the right question to ask. It's not about that. It's about you just went somewhere you've never gone before.
Oh, I love the way you said that. It's not that question.
No,
It's allowing yourself to move into that space that you've never gone before. It's allowing yourself, when talking about data centers, to say, what if a community invited us? What would that take?
yes,
Right? It's a question like, what do you already know that you'll realize soon? I mean, it isn't the question, and that's the thing that drives me nuts. Anybody can do this. Just focus on the zone you're trying to get to. Weird is a zone. It doesn't tell you
yeah,
how to get there or what the definition of weird is. You know, it's you just know it. When you see weird, you know weird.
you
Go there.
feel it. You're just
Yeah,
like, ooh.
exactly.
Everybody clapped, by the way. Everybody was like, oh, that is so weird.
So, Joanne, as we're taking inbound questions here and answering those, I would love for you to describe what was it. So in this workshop, you are working with people who are trying to, as I understand it, figure out how to innovate better, strategize better around innovation, and so on. What did you want them to walk away with from this experience? Like, what would they be taking with them that they could apply on Monday morning? Because I think it's really relevant. It's like we're talking conceptually about a lot of things here. I'm giving
Yeah.
specific examples. You were working with people that you were saying, you're going to go do this. So, what
Yeah.
did you want them to walk away with?
So the goal of the workshop was to help give them tools to execute on strategies they did not create. So they
Ah,
were inheriting something from corporate
yeah.
and they got to own it and they got to show their manager or their boss that they own it while
Okay.
also being confident enough to help their people deliver it. But, there's a whole bunch of assumptions and unknowns built into that.
Sure.
And so we did three different versions of questioning exercises
Okay. So you
that
did the question bursts. What
we
else?
did a question burst, we did a persona building exercise to explore what do we think we know about the people we need to succeed
Mm,
and try to uncover the holes in our own understanding of what motivates these key stakeholders.
yeah.
And then we did a pre-mortem, which is the flip of how we usually do planning, which is we're here, how do we get there?
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
pre-mortem does two things. It flips. We go, we're there, but we failed.
Okay.
Get backwards from that failure. What happened just before we failed? What kind of
Mm,
failure was it? Who
yeah.
said it's a failure? And then through all of that, what it gives them is a deeper understanding of what they're being asked to do, the blind spots they may have before they even start.
Okay.
And if you do that pre-mortem several different ways, like we failed through a slow bleed, or we failed through a public blow up, or we failed because the world pivoted and we kept going, world went left, we kept going right. They have these, what Rita McGrath would call like these early warning signals. They've already mapped out, these are the ways we might fail. And if we start seeing something early on that path, we're going to stop and go, are we on path to fail
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah.
And if so, you can get ahead of it and you can adjust. You can adapt to the future that's actually unfolding versus head down trying to, force your reality on the world.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really just, don't take it at face value. Let's understand the people and the objectives deeply, and so that you can move forward with trusting yourself that you'll be able to ask the right things at the right time, enough that, we always say innovation is loopy, it's also wiggly, right? Juliana on a couple episodes ago shared, oh, I got to stop. But she shared that when you're flying A to B, you're only on path like 3% of the time. It's life is wiggly, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me give you a question from the audience.
Sure.
In the opposite of a question, is the opposite of a question a statement? I'm trying to figure out how to know when it's important to stop questioning and start making statements to move forward.
Yeah. So what I found is, and I think every one of us can relate to this. You're doing both in parallel. I know that sounds funny, but we think of questioning as a linear process, and it's really not. So where you're going to stop for a particular answer is if that answer gives you some forward momentum that you can plan and build around, which is something else you must do, that you're trying to do as you go along. However, the interesting thing to me is that um, the most powerful question is often the one that follows a question.
Mm,
So I think we all sense that. And when you start sensing that that power is dissipating, it's often a very good time to say, okay, so if I had to conclude an answer right now from what I've gathered from all my question asking, what would that look like? But second, how far do I want to take it? Meaning, how far do I want to take the answer and implement it? Is it just a reference point and I need to ask a new series of questions? Or is it something I can actually build something around? If I'm building around it, a project to go forward, that's going to have a 6 month or 12-month time span to it, what is it that I'm going to ask myself along the way to make sure that I'm still on track for what I'm aiming for and that what I'm aiming for is really what I should continue to aim for. So those things are really happening in parallel. You're just using the questions in a different way. And you can feel, especially with practice, when the use and the utilization starts to diminish. And I think that's often a good signal to say, well, what can I conclude at this point for right now? And then allow yourself to kind of contemplate what questions you'll continue to ponder rather than just living in the question space alone.
yeah. I will add to that in the intentional discovery process.
Hmm.
When we start landing in the same kind of point from very different
Mm,
domains or perspectives,
yeah.
like when the community's expressing the same pain as the construction lead or the land acquisition lead, it's like, oh, these people have very different motivations, but they're saying the same thing. There's a
Yes.
there there. I'm going to put
Yes.
that over here as something we probably want to solve,
Yes.
right?
Remember we were talking earlier about Deb Meyer and the 5 habits of the mind and the questions that you ask. And the second one was, is there a pattern? That's the
Yes.
kind of pattern she's talking about.
Yes.
It's not, I mean, it can be a simple pattern, but it's usually something bigger than that. Like, oh my gosh, we have all these people on this team, and they have very different assumptions that they're working with. Isn't that curious?
Yes.
However, there's this interesting overlap between people who are coming from very different perspectives. Maybe those are the assumptions that are either A, worth keeping and building on, or B, if they're all saying it looks kind of fuzzy, digging into more to see, if it's still really relevant or what we can do about that. So yeah, it's a perfect example of is there a pattern?
Assumptions. They are the bane of most of life's problems in human interaction.
Yeah.
Is just, I mean, not even just innovation. It's like I Terry called me out over the weekend. We were together for a lab retreat, and I made an offhand comment like, you got to wonder about people who don't love dogs. And she's like, well, I didn't really grow up around dogs, so I didn't love one. I didn't love them until I got one. And I'm like, oh, that was totally an assumption I've been carrying for like
Yeah.
50
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
All right, this is a good one to end on
Okay.
because we haven't talked about AI. Can you imagine? I mean, we talked
No.
about data centers though. So,
Yes. Yes, that's true.
but this is the first time we're saying AI. Do you have a perspective on using AI as a thought partner in questioning?
Yes, I have many thoughts, but let me try to boil it down to just a couple. I think it's really important to understand what you're trying to accomplish with any thought partner. And ultimately, you can't go anywhere in answering that question if you don't understand what your own individual advantage is. What is it that when many are bringing to the table things that are going to come together and make something fantastic, something innovative, you better know at least what you think you bring. Why wouldn't we ask those same questions when it comes to AI? Meaning, as I'm putting more on AI to do for me rather than what I do, some of the people I interviewed who are in this space said, well, to what extent are you giving up your agency? To what extent are you cognitive offloading and you're moving yourself out of the practice of thinking, including the mistakes you make and that you learn from? So I think that that's the way to answer that question is to understand who you are and what your role is and how AI can be a thought partner in that context, rather than assuming, oh my gosh, AI is a great thought partner and it belongs everywhere, which just flat out isn't true. It can be incredibly valuable. It can also be really detrimental if it's undermining the you side of it.
Yeah, well said. I think that is the a good point to land on. And because I want to save 1 minute, but I will say this: you can't amplify a skill with AI that you don't have. So,
True.
and AI's whole mechanical, electrical, computer underlay is averaging.
Yeah.
So if you
To an
want,
answer.
right. So if you want to be average about answering or asking questions, go ahead.
Yeah.
Use AI blindly or develop these skills, and you will see how you use AI as a thought partner change.
A- Absolutely. And AI can't teach you how to question.
No,
It
it
can
can't.
support your questioning, but it
Yes.
can't teach you how to question. So hang on to that.
Yeah. So as we close out, tell us where we can find you, what do you want the audience to do next, and where can we find you?
Yeah, what I want the audience to do next is to think about their own questioning, how they ask, where they ask, why, and if they're not, how they can do more of it. That's what I really want. To learn my thoughts on that, my website is lrspeaks.com, my initials LR and then speaks.com, and you can learn about my books, my articles, my consulting, and pretty much everything else.
And the book's available everywhere?
Everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere. And there's an audiobook coming.
There is an audiobook a coming.
Good.
Yeah, all the
Awesome.
recording is done. It hasn't been released, but in the next couple weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Larry. I
Ah,
learned
Joanne,
a
what a thrill.
ton as always.
Totally enjoyed this, and next time we'll have to do it with Taryn.
Yes. Yes. And again, if you're in Toronto, go pester her. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and keep an eye out for the follow up. Have a great week.